I'm Maddie, and welcome to the Inside Scoop on Camel Pose. I got a couple of things with me today. I've got 2 blocks, I've got a blanket, and I've got a mat. Depending on where you are, you might want more or less of these things. I just have these things around. This is just kind of like warming up for Camel Pose itself, different modifications that you can use, and all that jazz. So let's jump right into it, shall we? So Camel has got the whole spine going on with it. So blanket, in case your knees are kind of tender. I don't think you should raise yourself up super high with the blanket. Try and keep it as low as possible. Unfold it to your desired thickness, but nothing too crazy. So I would say that Camel Pose is a pose that we use a little bit later in a practice because we want to be warmed up for it. You don't just want to go in cold with it for a lot of, whether you're teaching or whether you're practicing it. It's just usually a good rule of thumb. Not to say that you can't do it, you just won't. Just keep that in mind when you're getting into it. So I did a yoga class today, so I feel like I'm pretty warm, so I can get into this. So knees about hips width distance apart. We usually gauge that with 2 fists, boop, and then adjust as you need. And then toes can be tucked or untucked, whatever you prefer to do. And then we bring our hands to the low back. Nice. And then this is where the variations come into play here. So you can have, starting off with the hips stacked above the knees, you can start to lean back. So it's not so much about pushing your hips forward as about the rest of your torso going back towards the back of the room here. Hands stay on the low back for support, elbows reaching back to the back of the room. And then you find where you want to be. So since I'm warm, I can start to reach back. Got a pretty bendy low back in my own practice. So this is gonna look different for you if you have a different type of low back. And then the neck is another question that I get a lot. What should I do with my head? Do I have to like open up my throat like that? You don't have to make that sound. I don't really even know where that came from. Or what should I do? So here's a couple of ways that you can approach it depending on how your neck is feeling. So it's a good rule of thumb usually to keep your neck in line with your spine. So you probably don't want to be like crunching in as you're going back. And then I like to adjust my hands as I go deeper back to fully support myself. And then I'm keeping it in line with the spine here. I could, if I wanted to, start to look back, but then once again, just like we don't want the crunching in, we don't want the crunching the other way either, so just to like crunch it the other way. If you have the amount of length where you can start to look back, awesome. Just keep that nice long neck in mind. Beautiful. So that's one way, hands stay at the low back. Another way is for hands towards the ankles. And this is where the tucked and untucked comes into play as well. I like my toes to be tucked for this one. So once again, we're coming at it by just kind of leaning back, seeing how we feel, and then maybe we can reach for those ankles. Blocks. Maybe we can't fully reach back yet, but we like the idea of going in that direction. Bringing blocks to the outside of those ankles is awesome. So we start to reach back, we bring our hands here, and then we maybe decide to have our neck neutral. Maybe we decide to have our gaze looking back, still keeping ourselves nice and long here. One thing we don't want, and what I'm starting to do here, is have your hips move back. Keep those hips stacked on top of the knees here. Really reaching, keeping the body engaged through that core to help protect that low back. And then as we come out of it, we go out the same way we came in. Whoop, whoop. And then usually before, like a big heart opener like that, before we counter pose, take a couple of deep breaths. Feel the heart rate slow down. Check in with yourself here. And then I like a good, set those bad boys off to the side, a good closed-kneed child's pose to help counteract that. Oh. You can also go for rabbit, which is more engaged. It's not really as much of what I personally like to do, which probably means that I need to do it some. But just a regular closed-knee child's pose. We bring our forehead towards the mat, either arms behind you or out in front, whatever your shoulders are feeling. And then for rabbit, we bring our hands behind, grabbing onto our heels, and then we round, chin towards the chest, catting through that spine. So what you're going for is like almost getting the crown of your head to the mat and folding in. Feel those hips lift, grabbing onto those heels. Bring it back down. It's more engaged stretch, counter stretch of that low back. I usually like to warm up getting into camel pose with like baby cobra. It's a real fan favorite. It's like bread and butter in a yoga class. Coming down onto the floor, hands underneath the shoulders, tops of the feet sealed down. Inhale, lifting it up, using the power of that low back so it's nice and warm, coming on down. We can come up into a half locust, full locust, doing some wheel. Those are all great poses that can help warm up our low back for camel. And that goes for any back bend, really. And I like camel because it's not just a back bend, it's also a heart opener. We think about, it's like using the whole torso. All right. So that's what I have to say. That's the inside scoop on camel pose. Thanks so much for joining me at Soul Strong Yoga here. And wherever it is that you are in your day, I hope it's going great. Bye-bye.